Confidence simplified. So, what I want to talk about today is what it means to be confident and simplifying confidence down into something you can actually start to build. I'm going to tell you why confidence is much different than you've ever been taught, and the way you've been going about confidence is actually kind of ruining your confidence. And so, let's start off with the base belief breaker, which is confidence is not something that you necessarily build. It's more so something that you have when you're young and then you lose progressively. Then we reach a point where we realize we've lost it, and then we say, I don't have confidence, and then you want to figure out how to build it. Now, the way to actually build confidence, I believe, fundamentally comes down to unlearning the things that have made you unconfident or have removed confidence. So the most important piece is to understand confidence is our default state. When we're a little kid, we don't worry, we don't doubt ourselves. We are naturally inclined to explore, to test things, to try stuff. But then what happens is we start to slowly get taught by essentially little micro traumas or sometimes bigger traumatic events or just events that are negative that then our brain uses to teach us to basically constrict what we do. If you think about it, we are totally free when we're very young. We're trying everything. We're picking stuff up. We're hitting stuff off the walls. And then we slowly get taught by the world, okay, here's what not to do. Now, if you start to consider how that relates to anybody's confidence, you think, okay, well, why do I not try things now? Why don't I just jump up on the table whenever I want to? Why don't I jump into games and go crazy and do insane things? Well, it's because you've been essentially taught through conditioning to not do something. You've been trained to not act in a certain way. And so it's really important to consider that if you're not confident right now, it's not because you don't have the capability of being confident. It's that you've almost unlearned that base level confidence that you once had. Another way to think of it is that you're not confident because you've learned insecurity. So what you really want to think is that being secure and confident is kind of like one end of the spectrum, and then you have on the other side of the spectrum, you basically have confidence. So you have like uncertainty, confidence. And when we start to consider where these two things really come into play, we want to ask ourselves, okay, if the default is confidence, what are the insecurities that I've learned? And the second you start to actually look back at your past and look to find moments where you basically unlearned something or basically you learned insecurity or unlearned confidence in a way, then you start to realize, oh, okay, I got it. So there's actually a whole bunch of things that I've done that have not necessarily been good or bad, but what the experience taught me was that I should avoid that behavior, right? And the problem with this is it's oftentimes not an accurate memory. Like what they teach in most like higher end psychology teachings is that fundamentally when something bad happens to you, more or less happening is that our brain is learning, okay, that is something we don't want to do again. If you went into a situation and you got hit really hard because you did a certain move, well, then your brain is going to learn from that event, or that traumatic event, basically. This isn't, I'm not talking about like true trauma necessarily, but events that are negative, it will teach you to not do that again. It'll teach you, okay, avoid that situation. So maybe don't do that cutback move. And the challenge with this is it's not just small things, or it's not just big things. So it's not just you went and got hit and you got blown up and you were injured for a while. It can be, I went in, I took a shot from a certain place and my teammate yelled at me, or my coach yelled at me, or my parents yelled at me after the game. And you think about, it's what you learned from the situation. And so you hear this cliche all the time of you either win or you learn. And I say this all the time because it's fundamentally true. Think about how this relates to your confidence, because you don't necessarily learn something good from an event. So it's not that you go into a situation and then you either win or you learn something good. It's you go into a situation, you may win or lose, but you learn something that may be helpful or may hurt you in the long run. And so starting to look back again and be reflective is super important. This is why I talk so much with all my players about reflecting as a part of your system. It's a part of the mental system that I want every player that I work with to use. That you want to prepare yourself. You want to make sure you're actually doing the preparation, which requires you, number one, even prior to that preparation, you need to have reflected on what has happened before. You need to reflect on, okay, do I know I have certain strengths? Do I know I have certain weaknesses? What have I done that worked? What have I done that didn't? What were the lessons that I need to learn or lessons that I need to? That's the key piece. It's not always the things you learned. It's saying, what are the things that I did learn, but I need to actually unlearn because they're not helpful. That is the major shift in perspective, because then when you do that reflection, then you create a plan around that. And then after you set that plan, then you actually go into, okay, let's prepare. Let's do all the actions of preparation. That's going to lead you to actually wiring your software, the stuff in your head. That's the actual mental ability. It's the confidence, the ability to get into flow state, the ability to be focused. That's the hockey IQ, the taking in information, making effective decisions, and then like being able to actually process and use that information to then make the next decision, right? Because fundamentally, again, I've talked about this a few times, IQ is fundamentally, it's just getting what you want. It's just making what you want to have happen in a game. It doesn't matter how you make it happen. If you're able to consistently make something happen, well, then your IQ is high. It's just the truth, right? Like just because a player is able to do it at a certain level, well, they may have high IQ at a certain level, but when it translates up to the next level, they may struggle. So I think that if a player learns, okay, if I come in, enter the zone, and take a slap shot and it goes bar down, and I just keep doing that because that's a skill I'm good at, it might not translate to the next level. Like, for example, it might work in house league or AA, might not translate to AAA, or maybe it works in AAA, but it doesn't translate to junior, or whatever the case is. But at the moment, it is a high hockey IQ play because it's allowing you to get what you want out of the situation. So you learn to get what you want more consistently. But if you're not getting what you want, then you need to work on your IQ. You need to work on that part of your mental game. And really what we do at Identity Shift, really what we do in all of our programs is we're working with people to help them to build both the mental ability, so the ability to be confident, the ability to get into a flow and trust yourself, to have that focus, to have that longer term growth mindset or mentality, have the mentality of the best players in the world. These are these important tools. You want to have all these pieces, but then what we do is we take all that confidence and that trust that we've built, and then we connect it to making effective decisions. We help players understand how to take in better information, how to process that information effectively, how to make the best possible decisions to get what you want. Because if your mental game is not getting what you want on the ice, if you're not actually working on mental and then playing better, actually doing things that lead you to getting what you want, well then you're not really improving your mental game. If you're creating basically a fake reality that's not even doing anything for your performance, then it's not really effective. So that's why what we're really trying to do here is help players to take all these tools, and you're trying to take them and translate them into getting what you want on the ice. Now, this is assuming that you have the physical ability. If you have the physical tools, you know that you're fast, you know that you're a good skater, you can shoot, you have great stick handling, and you know that all those pieces are in place. Well, then what the bottleneck is going to be is that you don't actually have some kind of mental tool or tool set or a system to build that mental tool set to get you to where you want to go. It sounds almost like too obvious at times, but if you really think about what's stopping most players, so many players as you get to the higher and higher levels, if you look at literally any level, if you look at AAA, if you look at junior, whether it's typically you start to get like tier 2, but really especially tier 1, and then when you start to get into those higher levels, especially get D1, it gets more physical ability, gets closer and closer. You get to the higher level pros, physical ability is so close. So many players are so fast, so talented. They have the skill set. But then what's going to differentiate those players is the mental game. It's just so obvious when you really start to think about it, because it's just the players who are able to take the tool set and make the most out of it. And that's why I think it's a mistake that a lot of almost like kind of the sports psychology world makes, that you almost put too much emphasis on just building that confidence, just dealing with stress, when I do think that is a key part of the system, and you should have a way of doing that. And that's a big part of, we're essentially kind of working through a few phases whenever we work with a player. It's like getting the mental blocks out of the way. Then once the mental blocks are out of the way, it's helping them build into the player they really want to be, and understanding, okay, blocks are out of the way. Now I have the focus, the confidence to get into the right state that I want to be in. Then it's all about making the best possible decisions. That's what's going to get you to be the best player you can be and keep moving up levels, is finding those tools. Now, I know I'm kind of ranting on this. I get it. I understand it's repetitive. I say this stuff a lot, but it's to drive these points home that if you're doing what everybody else is doing, you're going to get similar results to everybody else. It's the physical stuff that everybody's already figured out. Like, if you're not doing the physical stuff, well, then you need to figure out what you need to do mentally to get yourself to do the physical stuff. If you need help with putting a proper system together for the physical stuff, we have that in our programs. We have full systems that are based on what the best pro players that we've studied, what they're doing for their conditioning, their speed, their strength, their power, how they build muscle, how they put on mass, how they lose fat. All those pieces are put together in this system. I think that it's becoming more and more common that the higher level of player you are, the less likely you need physical help, the less likely you need skill and mechanical help, which, again, you still might, and you want to keep refining those things. But where the real separator starts to come is, are you able to get yourself to optimize or get the most out of the abilities you've built in terms of your physical ability and your mechanics? That's the question. It's the truth. And if you're not getting the most out of those things, then you're kind of saying it's like having a race car that can go miles an hour and then you never actually take it that fast and you drive it on a 60-mile-an-hour road. And it's like, well, yeah, that's fine. Like, it's cool if you want to do that. But the real question I have for you is, what if you could? What if you could drive it at that top speed? What would it be like? Isn't that what you got it for? Because if you're doing all the physical work and working on your skills and going to skill sessions and all that stuff, only to show up to games and not believe in yourself and not trust yourself, just doesn't seem super effective. And if you're wondering, okay, like, how do we help players do this? How do we actually take a player, or how can you take yourself and figure this confidence stuff out? Here's what I'd recommend. Realize that the reason you're not confident fundamentally comes down to things you have learned that you need to essentially unlearn. There are these moments of bad learning or kind of traumatic events that have taught you something, and your brain has learned the wrong lesson from the situation. This is the reason you're not confident, because at the base level, you have confidence within you, but it has been unlearned. And so in order to actually get yourself to that place, you need to figure out, what do I need to unlearn? So the first place to start is something that sounds almost too obvious, which is awareness. So what I want you to start to notice is every time that you don't act the way you want to, every time that you act with insecurity or you don't act confidently, I want you to pause and try to give yourself mental space as much as you possibly can and notice that that is something you have learned to do. That is a lesson you have learned in some way. It is not a bad or a good thing, but it's something you've learned, and it's leading you to not operate the way you want. So note that down, because that's the first piece to really dig into, is you have the awareness to notice it. Then when you do notice it, you need to be able to acknowledge the fact that it is not true. Now, when you're in the middle of a game, this is not going to be the time where you want to say, oh, let's try to solve this problem. Let's try to work through and unlearn this traumatic event, or try to unlearn this lesson. In the moment, what you really want to do, so there's kind of two different tactics you can use. So in-game and then outside of the game. In-game is about having a really quick thing that can kind of just snap you out of it. Then outside of the game, you actually have a full process that you want to go through. And this is not just like, I'm going to give you one way of doing it. There's many paths, and there's a complete system we've put together for this. But fundamentally, in-game, it's be aware. You notice that this event is happening, this moment of insecurity, and then you want to label it. So say, okay, that's insecurity, because now that you notice and labeled it, you've identified it, create a little bit of separation from yourself. So you're not like identified with it. You're not saying, I'm not confident. You're saying, there's that insecurity again, or there's that moment of not being confident. Now you've created some separation, right? There's like distance between you and the thing. And then the next piece you want to go into is say, okay, got it. This makes sense. I understand it. Then you want to surrender to it. So this is a weird one, but once you've labeled it, you've created space, you want to say, okay, cool, whatever. I let go. I'm letting go of this feeling. Something I like to do with players is I say, okay, just let go and open your hands up. Literally imagine that you're holding on to this pattern. I want you to imagine just letting it go. And you'll notice that when you do, you can kind of let your whole body just relax for a second. And this can be your focus cue. I have players use a focus cue, and it's let go. And you can feel it. You can even practice it right now. Notice, think back to a more recent event where you made a play you didn't want to make. So bring yourself back, visualize that moment. Okay, so now as you're visualizing that moment, I now want you to think about, okay, so I'm aware of this moment. I'm aware of what's happening. I notice that this pattern has came up. And now as you bring awareness to it, you label it, okay, there it is, right? There's that anger coming up. There's that fear. There's that insecurity. And then as you do that, I want you to literally imagine, just kind of close your hands and then just do that a few times and just kind of let go. You can even have a focus cue that you say, in terms of so you physically do it. So kind of kinesthetic, you actually do it, and then you say, let go, or whatever the cue is you want to use. And there you go. That's something that I work with a lot of my one-on-one guys to discover that pattern for themselves and find really what works for them. There's an easy thing you can execute right there. Simple. Just let go. And then what I like to tell players is, okay, now you want to kind of shift the story. So this is where you want to shift the story, positive thinking. In a game, again, the challenge is it's easy for me to say this. It's harder for you to remember. So this is something you actually have to consciously practice outside of the rink, which is why I explain this to you as something you can do in the game, but you're not just going to like hear me say this once and then remember every step of this to do in game. It's kind of this process that I teach you kind of this like bigger macro skill of doing this in a piece by piece fashion. So we do this over the course of a longer period. We're actually rebuilding out the full system, which I'm really excited about. And the way the new system is going to work is that it's going to be basically a few months of going through each piece of this, teaching you it, and then understanding how to stack them together. And then when you learn how to stack each of these skills together, what happens is that you just kind of automatically do this. And I remember seeing there was, I believe it was Novak Djokovic, and he talked about that he looks at the mental game not as this idea of never feeling bad things, like never having negativity. He basically said, I see a good mental game as the ability to have an emotion. So you make a mistake, you yell, you scream, you hit your racket, whatever, and then how quickly can you come back? How big is that loop? Is it just a half second? Is it okay, it happens and right back, done? Or is it this big, massive loop that takes you multiple matches to get out of? And that's, to me, that's kind of the sign is if you're in a slump right now, well, then you're probably not very good at getting out of that loop. And that's just the truth of it. So if you're not good at getting out of that loop, if you're stuck right now, well, then that's the skill we want to work on. And so if you're a client I'm already working with, if you're somebody who I haven't worked with, keep an eye out for this new system that's about to drop, because once we start to walk you through this process, it's teaching you how to do this loop so quickly that it becomes something that takes a few seconds and you do it unconsciously. But we got to teach you it consciously. We got to stack the skills over top of each other, and then this process happens. So again, just circling back to what this process is. So first of all, you want to be aware. So you bring awareness, then you notice it. So now you've noticed. Once you notice it, then you want to label it. So you give it a label. You're clear on what that label is. It makes sense to you. You say, okay, that's insecurity. Typically, that's fundamentally what it is. It's kind of fear, insecurity coming up. You give it that label. Then you have your focus cue, or your kind of surrender statement, as we like to teach it in the full system. It's something that allows you to let go, and you have that kinesthetic, you have that physical thing that you do, like could be like letting go with your hands. It could be kind of tapping. There's these new tapping techniques that are actually finding have quite a bit of science behind them, where you can tap certain parts of your body and you can train yourself to use these different tapping spots, and it'll actually train you to basically be able to release anxiety. This is the same concept without the tapping. So tapping may be something we introduce into the system as kind of a component of it. If it works, right? Like I don't really give a shit what it is. If it works and it helps, we'll implement it. Base level, that's what we're really working on here. So I want to help you to understand how to bring these tools into your career. And so now that we bring that kind of clarity of, okay, letting it go, next piece is now we want to stack in the story. I know this has been a long explanation, but this is the major mental skill. This is essentially explaining to you the system to build confidence, right? So now we let it go, and we've let it go. Now it's about reframing the story. So you need to essentially analyze what that, again, like in game, you're not going to do this, but you want to basically in game, all you're really doing is saying, okay, what is the future forward thinking? What is the story I'm telling myself, which is fundamentally self-talk. So I'm going to have a great game. I am a great player. I am moving forward in a good direction. So it's essentially saying like, I'm good here. I'm moving forward well. Outside of the game, this confidence building system is more around, okay, what we're really trying to do at a super base level is we're trying to reframe what that past experience was, learn the proper lesson from it, and then we move forward effectively and create that story moving forward. So in a game, keep it simple, just a forward thought. Where are we going? What are we doing next? And this creates that kind of positive mental momentum. And you've already let go. You've released it. You've surrendered, which is a skill that you have to master. I'm not just telling you you're going to do it and it'll be perfect every time. It might be. Some players pick it up and it's game changer. Most valuable thing they learn working together. So that might just be all you need. Now, the process that we're naturally kind of moving into is emotional processing. This is kind of digesting the emotion. So something that we work with a lot of guys to do, and it's part of this system we're putting out very soon, it's understanding how to actually digest an emotion. It's understanding how to be with it. There's a concept in Eastern practice. This is something that yogis will practice. They call them samskars. And basically what it means is there's these kind of balled up undigested emotions is what they're talking about. And I don't usually call it that with a player, but really the point is to realize, okay, you have this undigested emotion. It's there. It hasn't been processed. And so sitting with the emotion, it feels uncomfortable, but it teaches you how to be with it, how to let it go and digest it. It's like when you eat a whole bunch of food and then it's kind of all stuck up in your stomach and you're like, ugh. It's kind of like, you can feel it. You feel heavy. And that's kind of how we feel mentally. We feel heavy. When we have a mental block, it weighs you down. That's why I call it a mental block, because it's like a block in your head kind of. And that's what we want to do, is we want to let it go. We want to learn how to digest it. So in game, you're really just creating that positive thought, that forward thought, changing the self-talk consciously, and then you just jump into the next shift and play. Just do whatever. You kind of just want to, the final piece to that in-game scenario is just let it go. Good. Like that, again, easy to say. This process is easy as shit to say, way, way harder to actually execute as a whole. That's why it's a process we learn. It's something we learn at a bigger picture, and then we bring it down into this kind of small, digestible thing, right? Like it's almost like the idea of, we used to have these giant computers that took up whole rooms in order to do what like our iPhone can do now, not even what our iPhone can do now, but it took all this power, and now we've been able to bring it down and bring it into this little tiny device. That's what we're doing now. We're trying to bring this down into this tiny little device. And that's, to me, that's where everything changes. That's the game changer. Just honestly, is like, can you take all these tools and bring them down into this small amount, a small skill, this usable tool? And that's something we worked a ton with when I worked with Alec Whipple. He now plays for University of Denver, Division I. One of the things we talked about a lot and helped him really build was this ability to, we did this whole process. We really walked it through. And this is what I do with my one-on-one guys, is I taught him these pieces one by one. And then what he was able to do is fundamentally build this into something every game. He was just able to do this process. Now he's able to let go of things super quickly, and he's mentally super, super tough. But it's tough to do at times, but it works when it works. It's amazing to see, but it's because he did the bigger work. He worked on his mental game overall, which allowed him to get into that, get to the point where it was an automatic skill that he uses without even really consciously doing it. And sometimes you may get out of the rhythm and you may lose it, and it's about still being good with awareness, being able to be aware and then notice, and then the process just happens, right? So you get better and better and better at the whole cycle, and then that cycle moves so smoothly that it's like easy to process these things. So super valuable skill. I cannot make enough of a point to say to you that if you're not bought in on really going all in with the mental game, if you don't have this system put in place, reach out. There's links below. You can fill out a form. There's also going to be ways you can reach out a little easier, but just fill out a form. I'll reach back out to you. And as long as you're serious and you actually want to go deep with this stuff, then I can help you. If you don't want to do any like high level stuff, you don't want to work with me, you don't want to pay anything, I also have a free group where I teach you the basics of all of this stuff, give you the full like base foundation. It's not everything because I put a ton of work into the paid stuff, and I also obviously need to get paid in order to do this full time. So I have that as a separate higher level thing. And so if you're not confident, realize that confidence is your nature. You have a high base level confidence. It's just been lost. You've learned insecurity. You've learned to not believe in yourself. So what I want to help you to start to understand, and I want to encourage you to do, is to learn how to actually digest these things. I really say to unwire the old identity, because when you unwire the old identity, it allows you to unwire the insecurities, the fears, the doubts. When those things are removed, confidence naturally comes in. And then it's simply about deciding, who do I want to be, creating that picture of who you want to be. And then you naturally walk into that path, because when you set a clear destination, your subconscious mind is like a success machine. It knows how to get you to where you tell it to go, but a lot of times we just suck at telling it where to go, which is why we talk about setting goals, building the system, putting it all together. So if you want help, reach out. If you enjoyed this, please just like the podcast or like the YouTube video. Share it with somebody who you think it might help. I deeply appreciate you being here. I put my heart and soul into just helping you with this stuff, and I hope that it is valuable to you. So leave a comment if you have watched up to this point and just say, rank this 1 out of 10. How much did you like this video? How deep would you like me to go with certain topics? What would you like me to talk about next? And I hope you have an awesome day, awesome week. I'll talk to you soon.